Society 2023 Miles Franklin Literary Award, Shankari Chandran.
We're looking for great stories, and I think a lot of the great stories at the moment are coming out of people who are telling their backstories, telling their stories about growing up in this country, and it's important that we hear them.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sri Lankan Story here on Daily Mirror. Our guest today is connected to Sri Lanka, of course. She has won Australia's biggest literary award. She is an author and she has drawn spotlight following her recent accomplishment. On the program today, I'm pleased to have with me Australian Tamil lawyer Shankari Chandran. Shankari, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Isran. Lovely to be here.
Shankari, before we, of course, move on to your Sri Lankan connections, let's talk about your recent award. I mean, that was some accomplishment. You won Australia's biggest literary award. I mean, how does it feel?
It feels amazing. I actually, to be honest, definitely still have moments where I don't quite believe it, because it's such an extraordinary award, and I've thought about it and looked at the authors that have won it with such respect and admiration. So it's quite hard to believe that I have been awarded it myself.
Talk to us a little about the book which was behind this award, Shankari.
So Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens is set in a nursing home in Western Sydney, and it's set against the backdrop of rising racism in contemporary Australia, but it flashes back to the residents' lives in Sri Lanka, because a number of the residents and the staff who work there are originally Sri Lankan Tamil. And so it flicks between those two time frames. And it explores the role of storytelling and the way that we use storytelling to keep our memories alive and to preserve our culture and our identities and create connection and community. And it's also about the role of storytelling in creating a national identity and the way in which those identities are created to the inclusion of some and the exclusion of others. And so it's very much my love letter to community, but also my love letter to storytelling.
When did this book actually come out? What motivated you to write this story?
So the book came out in January 2022, but I had been writing it. I started to write it in January 2019. The motivation was that I had been spending a lot of time at a nursing home with my grandmother. And Amama lived in a nursing home on which Cinnamon Gardens, the nursing home, is based. She lived the last years of her life there. And I used to take my children to visit her, and we would sit with her in this nursing home, and 4 generations of one family would be together, and Amama would tell us stories of her life and her childhood. And because a lot of the residents in the nursing home were also Sri Lankan Tamil, she knew them from her childhood and her youth and throughout her life. And so she would tell us their stories as well. And I found that the nursing home was an incredible place of community, because we would run into extended family who were all visiting their amamas and apapas. And it was also an incredible place of storytelling, because we would listen to her and learn so much about community and family and history, religion, politics, and culture. And I thought, this is an extraordinary way of transferring transgenerationally memories and culture through storytelling, and also an incredible place of community. I would love to set a novel in that place.
Because you were not born in Sri Lanka, right?
No, I was born in London, raised in Canberra, and then studied in Sydney, and lived in London for a good 10 years. And I'm now back in Sydney.
Back in Sydney. But you have been traveling to Sri Lanka, I gather?
Many times, yeah. So you've been a lot since 2014. I've come many times for research for all of my novels, because they're all, a portion of all my work is based in Sri Lanka. And we haven't lived in Sri Lanka though since the late 70s. My family hasn't lived in Sri Lanka since the late 70s and early 80s when they left.
Your parents left in the early 80s, is it?
They left in the late 70s, and then the rest of the family. So a few subunits of the Chandran clan left in the late 70s, and then the rest of them left just up after 83, basically 83 to 86.
Okay. And are you maintaining that relationship still with Sri Lanka? I mean, a lot of people, after they move out, some people like to leave the past behind and,
Yeah,
move on
yeah.
with their new lives. Some people like to keep a connection.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think my cousins and I, our generation of cousins that were really raised outside of Sri Lanka, we maintain our connection through our parents because they still have a very strong connection to Sri Lanka, and in particular the north and the east. And they still have a lot of love for it and a lot of memories and a yearning really for home and for homeland. And so my generation's relationship is very much through the received memories of our older generation and through their storytelling, and that's how they've gifted us that culture and that history.
I'd like to go a bit deeper into your book. I'm just reading,
Sure.
some of the press release that was issued after you won the prestigious award in Sydney. And it says that the book also explores the themes of war, racism, family love, as well as friendship. How do you see these issues right now, in the Sri Lankan context? You mentioned earlier about Australia as well, how racism is still there as well. I mean,
Hmm.
how would your book look to draw further attention to these issues, which we see in the two countries which are connected to, and how, people need to address these issues?
Yeah, I think of literature as a really safe place in which to explore difficult ideas, because I think for both any kind of Sri Lankan and certainly all kinds of Australians, the concept that our country or our people might be racist, or that I think we struggle to acknowledge bigotry, we struggle to acknowledge racism, and we struggle to acknowledge the damage that we've done to each other. And so storytelling is an interesting entry point to explore those very difficult themes without the reader being or feeling judged. And in the sort of quietude of a novel and the reflections of their own mind, they can ask themselves those difficult questions. What is their role in race, racism, and identity, and indeed in Sri Lanka, what is their role in war? And in post-conflict reconstruction or lack thereof. And so storytelling creates an opportunity to do that and to reflect quietly without the scrutiny of other people. And it asks more questions, I think, than it answers, because it's not really for me to say, tell, or answer things for other people. So when people ask me, what are you trying to say with Try Time at Cinnamon Gardens? I will always reply, actually, I'm not trying to say anything. I am trying to explore and understand these issues for myself, because writing for me is first and foremost a way of conversing with the page. So I converse with myself and with the page through writing and through storytelling. And it's through the storytelling that I am able to disentangle my own confusion and rage, grief, and sometimes joy, often joy, and love over events in history or events that are still taking place in the present, and indeed my concerns for the future.
But of course, in these two countries, both in Australia and in Sri Lanka, as you said, events in history, when they are
Mm,
discussed, some people tend to, try to want to forget history, whereas
yeah,
others want to try to look back into history and try to address the root causes of some of the issues that both countries are facing.
yeah.
Is that something that you're also looking to sort of draw attention to through your book?
I
Apart from just
in
asking questions, should there be more done by the people and the powers that be?
Yeah, look, I'm no longer or not ever was a citizen of Sri Lanka, right? So in some respects, as a diasporic Tamil, I can understand if people think, well, what right does she have to say anything at all about Sri Lanka from the safety and security of Sydney? And that may be so. I can only offer observations as an outsider and also as a lawyer that's worked in the social justice space. And certainly, societies post-war that don't explore what it was that led to that conflict, and societies that don't acknowledge, generally through a truth and reconciliation, some sort of transitional justice mechanism, those countries, they don't ever fully recover. I mean, there's no full recovery from anything really, but their recovery as a unified nation is always deeply and systemically flawed, because they have not had the courage and the capacity to talk about what happened and how terrible it was, what it was that caused it, and what it is that they can do better for each other going forward. And that's where, again, I think that in literature, there's many an extraordinary novel that serves to record and report and preserve the memory, not in order to dwell in it and not in order to blame and shame, but really to take that first step towards reconciliation, which is the telling of truth. And so I think novels and literature and fiction is an important way to do that, particularly in an environment where the country itself and the institutions of power themselves do not allow for that truth telling, and indeed would prefer to erase and hide and pretend.
What was the reaction like when you won that prestigious award in Sydney?
Oh my God, not just in Sydney, the whole Tamil diaspora went nuts. And so I think my dad is like on the world's largest WhatsApp group, and it just went insane. Yes, so I have received many, many messages from aunties and uncles and annas and aklas and thambis that I don't know even, who are very keen
Did
to
you did you even
wonderfully to
think
reach
that you're
out.
going to win this sort of
No.
award?
Oh my God, no. No, I'd actually forgotten about the awards cycle, because I had been nominated, or my publisher had put the book forward for 2 awards that I thought I had an okay chance of getting longlisted for, but perhaps nothing more than a long listing. I thought that a long listing would be incredible. And I had not been longlisted for either of those awards. So I was like, yeah, okay, this is it, right? The award cycle is over. It's just not a novel that is, getting the attention of panels. And so I forgot about it. So when my publisher called me to tell me that I'd been longlisted, I was like, what? What do you mean I've been longlisted for the Miles Franklin? I didn't even know you submitted me for the Miles Franklin. And then it just went from there, right? Long listing, then a month or whatever it is later, you find out that you've been shortlisted. And then shortly after the shortlisting became public, they called to tell me that I'd won, and then that I had to keep it a secret for several weeks, which, how good
The
Sri
actual
Lankans are
award
at keeping
ceremony.
secrets. Yeah, well, this is it. So then I had to not tell my parents, because, once you tell one Sri Lankan, you've told them all. And so that was a very long and difficult few weeks. And then I eventually told them very, very close to the actual awards ceremony.
And this is not the only book that you've written. Of course, you've written a couple of other books, is it?
Yes. So Song of the Sun God was published first in Sri Lanka, and now it's been republished in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. At the end of this year, it'll come out in the UK. And that was Song of the Sun God. And then my second novel was called The Barrier, which was published in Australia and New Zealand.
And
And
what
next year, I've got 1 or 2 books coming out.
1 or 2 books coming up? So you already started
Yes.
writing those, or they're already for publication?
So one is in the final stages of being edited, and so I hope it's the final stages. And that will be, I need to finish that by the end of September, I think. And then that will be slated for publication in the early part of next year. And the other one is again in the final stages of editing, but I think the final stage will begin in a couple of months.
Are you ready to reveal what these 2 books are about?
Well, the second book that will come out next year is actually an old manuscript that had never been published before, and it is a political thriller set in Sri Lanka at the end of the Civil War. And so it's sort of, I'm a real John le Carre fan, so it's my homage to John le Carre. and also to the rise and fall of superpowers and the way that they are complicit through intervention and through non-intervention in the conflicts of small but important nations like Sri Lanka.
What?
Sorry, what was
Sorry.
your question?
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Oh no, and then the first novel that will come out next year. So that the second one will come out as first in Audible and then 6 months later in print. And then the other novel will come out in the early part of next year through print, through my publisher Ultimo Press, and that is a novel set in far west New South Wales, about the power of community and the role that it plays when one of their own residents, someone that they love within their community, is in danger. And that's all I can tell you about it for now.
And what sort of got you into writing? I mean, is this something that you wanted to do from younger days as well, or you suddenly started
Yeah,
writing a book and then?
yeah, I've always loved writing since I was young, and I particularly enjoyed reading. Never really had aspirations to be a writer, but never really the confidence to pursue it in my youth. And enjoyed journaling and wrote, the typical kind of really self-conscious, angst-ridden journal entries that no one should ever read. And then just later in my late 30s, really, when I moved, or mid 30s, when I migrated back from London back to home in Australia, I found that transition quite challenging because Australia had changed and I had changed, and I had really struggled to see a place for myself in Australia. And I had brought back, my husband and I had brought back our 4 children, and so it was a massive commitment and a massive change. And so in order to help me adjust to that, because writing is very therapeutic, I began to write, and from that process, Song of the Sun God emerged.
And has this board sort of? I mean, what has it done as far as your future is concerned as an author? What how do you
Yeah,
intend on using that?
God, who knows? Sales have been good for my try time at Cinnamon Gardens.
Okay.
And I understand that I have cousins who are going around the world with suitcases of my books because it's not yet. Yeah, it's not yet. I have very supportive cousins. It's not yet available in all countries or all territories, and so until that time, all Sri Lankans will need to activate their cousin network and procure books in that manner. So sales have been good, and I
The book is
feel
not officially available in Sri Lanka, is it?
I don't think so. No, you can try through Amazon. Like some of my cousins have been able to get it through Amazon, but I don't know how they're doing it because others have said that it's not available in their countries. Um, so really the most effective way is the next time an auntie or uncle is traveling, ask them to take a second suitcase. And then uh, I've been just really encouraged and feel more confident about writing more, and feel very I feel really proud of myself, actually, and proud of the family, because it's a collective effort to write a novel. Is definitely a collective effort, and I'm really very happy for us, actually. That sounds weird. I'm very happy for ourselves and very happy for the novel itself, because stories have a life of their own, right? Books
Yeah.
are sort of living things. Once you've created them or even started them, they take on a life of their own. And so I feel happy for the book because it is going throughout the world, making friends and creating community.
What sort of advice would you give people who want to be like you?
Don't try to be like me.
Who
I
want
don't want to be like
well,
me.
who want to be a successful author?
Um, okay, so I would say the advice that I give myself is to really just keep writing, and so I try to write as often as I can, whenever and wherever I can. I think that writing it's quite solitary. I don't think of it as lonely because I have so many characters inside my head that I'm never alone. I'm just always with my thoughts, so that's not lonely. But it is a solitary endeavor, and particularly the first 10,000 to 100,000 words are very solitary. And so I would say, really just face into the blank page, expect it to be difficult, and show up every day. I think there's a beautiful quote by Neil Gaiman, and he says something like, writing is about showing up to your computer and writing one word after another, and it's as simple and as difficult as that. Yeah, so that's what I would say.
And what?
And back yourself, because Sri Lankans, in particular, my generation anyway, there was a huge amount of sort of emphasis on, being professionals and being secure and studying hard and working hard, and I work incredibly hard as a writer, and I study hard as a writer because I study literature. Everything I do is studying for the next novel, and every word I write is practice for the next word that I write. And so I would say, that I think we're raised well and taught good values and a good work ethic, but it's okay to apply that to a creative and more frightening endeavor, such as staring into the blank page.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, at least there are a few that I've come across as well, who start writing and then halfway through they say, oh, I lost that passion, I lost that the oomph, to continue with the story or the book that I wanted to write, and they just give up. I guess we need to have that determination and a goal, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think if the first draft for me, I don't write the first draft for publication. I write the first draft to smash out the first draft. And so Stephen King has a really great book called On Writing. It's part memoir, part writing, a book about writing. And so in that, he says, put super glue on your bum and sit down for 6 to 8 hours and don't look back. And so I found that advice when I read that book. I actually found On Writing quite life-changing for my writing practice, because I will literally, particularly for the first 10,000 words, when I'm really doubting myself, I will just try to smash those words out, and I don't reread anything I've written. I push through the pain. I will give myself 20-minute sprints to try to write 100 to 200 words, walk away, come back. But I push hard to get through it, because it's worth it. Once you have to trust that when you do get through it, it will come on its own.
Well, it was a real pleasure talking to you, Shankari. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you, Isran. Really lovely to meet you and to talk to you.
My pleasure. And well, congratulations once again on winning Australia's biggest literary award.
Thank you very much.
And that's all the time we have for you for the Sri Lankan story on Daily Mirror for this week. Till next time, stay safe.